Maybe pause in your mountain pose once more, inhaling deep from nose to toes. I said it backwards, but I bet you figured it out. You breathe all the time. Exhale however you will. From here, inhale, perhaps lift your hands overhead. Bending at the hips, you might dive forward for a fold. Bending the knees as needed, plant both hands. Come down to hands and knees. Again, you have the option to bring a blanket underneath for a little cushion, practicing self-care. From your tabletop, tuck your toes, cover the knees, lift your hips, find downward facing dog. You might take your handprints a little wider as we prepare for this work. And bring your knees down for tabletop again. And inhale, lift for downward facing dog. And exhale, down for tabletop. And inhale, lift for downward facing dog. And exhale, tabletop. Knees come to the floor. Inhale, this time, kick one leg behind you in a long line. And bring the knee to the floor. Other side, kick the leg behind, long line, toes point towards the floor, flexing towards the shin. Return to tabletop. Now, if the wrists are tired, an option might be to place blocks underneath your hands to reduce the intensity of the angle. Please make sure you have good grip between your blocks and your mat so that you feel safely supported while shifting your hips up towards the sky for downward facing dog. Another option might be to come down to forearms on your blocks if your wrists are really needing a break. Some things to think about. We might revisit them a little later. So maybe you're switching sides, lifting one leg long behind you, alternating from your tabletop. Or maybe with the toes tucked, you kick that leg so high up that you lift the lower knee, coming into three-legged dog. Kind of doing push-ups behind us. Bending the foot to the sky, alternating sides. Can you connect to your breath as you do this? Imagine pressing into all of your fingertips, like stepping on gas pedals with your hands. Imagine your hands pedal forward with such strength that you could slide a piece of paper under the heels of your hands. Nice work. From here, step one foot forward, replacing the hand. You might heel toe the foot forward and out towards the long edge of the mat, bringing both handprints on the inside of that bent knee. This is lizard pose. You can stay here and just allow the opening of the lower hip to happen. You notice that your right arm inside of your right knee can create a little connection there. Maybe your back toes grip the mat behind you. Pressing that heel away, the knee might lift off of the mat. Grounding through your left hand, you might peel your right hand, your inside hand, up towards the sky for a rotation. Kind of a low runner's lunge with a twist of the spine. Turn your handprint between the other hand and your foot. You might lower the knee to the mat or blanket behind you again. Again, this is enough. You can stay right here. You could also bring your hands to blocks, taking some weight out of the wrists, or choosing a height that's supportive, where you bring your elbows to those blocks. Just some choices, things to explore. If your knee is lowered behind you, if you're feeling very flexible today, one option could be to lift your back heel towards your hips. Maybe peel that right hand up again. Windmill it behind you, maybe catching that ankle. The thumb might point towards the sky, or maybe it stays pointing towards the floor. That might change which side of the ankle you grasp. Can you tuck your tail here? Notice how that moves the sensation to the front of the quad. And your front knee might angle out towards the side. You could use the connection of your hand with your ankle behind you to open your heart towards the sky, adding a little more rotation here. Breathe. Maybe smile to yourself. Softly go out the way you came in, releasing that foot to the floor behind you. And sliding the hand towards front and center again. Bringing the front knee towards the midline, towards that shoulder. Take your time here. You might use your blocks for support or just walk your hands close to your lowered knee. And bringing that front knee to tabletop again. It could feel nice to kind of toggle the hips from side to side. Notice the difference between sides. You know where we're going. As you're ready, you might come up to tall kneeling and step the other foot forward. Notice the ankle beneath the knee. Heel toe the foot out to the long edge of the mat. You can untuck the back toes, and press into that shin as though to drive yourself forward. Maybe bringing your handprints to the mat, or to blocks, or stacked books. Imagine curling your tailbone again towards your front heel, just noticing the heaviness of the hips towards the mat. Maybe you drive the top of the back foot into the mat so much that the knee lifts. Maybe the knee lowers again. You could also tuck the back toes, drive that heel backward, lifting the knee in that way. Activate the glute on your long leg behind you, opening the front hip all the more. You might choose to lower your knee. Maybe the left hand, the inside hand, peels up, rotating your heart towards your bent knee, reaching skyward. Notice how this changes the sensation of the pose. As you're ready, you can lower your hand again towards center for lizard again. If you practiced on the other side this way, you might choose to explore lifting the back foot, kicking the heel towards the hip, maybe reaching back with the opposite hand, thumb up or down, and reaching towards catching that ankle and kicking the foot into the hand. Activating the glute, maybe creating a little bit of a pedal there. Or using that connection to open the chest skyward. The front knee might lean outward. Really press into your grounded handprint to lift your heart towards the sky. Inhale here. Activate the glute behind you with the bent knee and ankle in your hand. And slowly, with control, release and unwind. Lower the foot to the floor and wind the hand around to the front. You might untuck the toes behind you, remove blocks if they're in your way. Walk your hands towards your grounded knee and bring your lifted knee to meet. Maybe pause in tabletop, toggling the hips from side to side again. Just a little more work here. You might choose to lower all the way to your forearms from your tabletop pose, strange though it may feel. Again, you have the option, if you have blocks available or stacks of books, to bring elbows to give you a little more space between your chest and the floor. So wherever you choose to practice, we'll first start in tabletop, just varied by lowering to our elbows, to our forearms. From here, we'll just kick one footprint toward the sky and switch sides. Keeping the knee somewhat at a 90-degree angle, lifting the shin like an elevator behind. You might notice some pops after the deep lizard hip stretch we just did. Maybe do this 5 times each side. Maybe before you place the knee on the floor, you crunch it towards your same side elbow. A little extra abdominal work there. You might choose to tuck the toes, cover the knees, and find dolphin pose with forearms grounded to the floor or blocks, lifting the hips. Scoop the belly in. You might walk your footprints towards your elbows. Notice the work of the shoulders here. Can you focus on your breath? You can stay here. This is enough. Or you might choose to alternate sides as you did from your tabletop variation, picking one footprint toward the sky at a time. One more option, which I only recommend if practicing on forearms grounded firmly to the mat instead of blocks. You might take elbows a little wide and ground both handprints to the mat as well. Tuck those toes, scoop the knees off the mat as you lift the hips. You might bring one foot a little closer as you begin to lift the other. And take tiny kicks, just hovering for a moment. This is great strength building to begin to practice shoulder stand. As you gain confidence, you can do this up against a wall, and maybe your feet start to rise up towards the wall. I'll report back when I'm there. So do with that what you will, just a little bit of fun to play with. All right, a little more love for the hips today. If you have a blanket or towel or quilt on your mat, much like I do, it might be nice to curl a back corner towards the opposite front edge, creating kind of a little triangle shape. And from tabletop, we'll bring the same side knee as the corner you just folded of your blanket towards the wrist on that same side. The ankle might come toward the front opposite corner of your blanket behind your opposite wrist. My right knee is behind my right wrist. My right ankle is further back behind my left wrist. From here, it could be nice to either curl that blanket up a bit more under your hip until you can scoot your whole opposite leg back behind you, settling onto that support. It could also be nice to bring a pillow or block under there for a little more height. From here, you have the option to flex your toes towards your shin, protecting the knee as you lean onto the outside edge of that calf and shin. Another option is to point the toes and roll onto a bit of the front of the shin of that bent knee in front of you. I know this pose takes a lot of arrangement, so please take care, take your time. It does feel awkward usually, but I think it's worth it if it feels accessible to you. So a nice test before you begin to fold is to see whether or not you can hold this arrangement without your hands' help. So I find I'm tipped a little far forward with this block underneath me. So that tells me I'm a little lifted off the ground more than I need to be. And maybe I'm ready to settle that hip onto that folded blanket underneath and scoot that whole leg, inchworm it back behind me. Notice how the glute activates as the knee scoots backward on the mat. Now from here, I can press into my lower leg and lift my hands. And now I know I'm ready to fold. So from here, you might walk your handprints forward, maybe coming onto the elbows, or maybe you stay right up here. Everything here is optional. These are all bus stops. You can get off at any point. It could be nice to bring that stack of books or support of any kind underneath the forehead. As you settle here for 3 to 5 long, nourishing breaths. Nice work. We'll set up on the other side, but take your time. You can press into your hands and walk them towards you. You might tuck the toes of your back foot to inchworm that leg forward, lifting your hips so that you can bring that knee back. Maybe gripping the mat with those toes behind, lengthening the back of that leg that was just folded up. You can unfold your blanket, let it be flat again. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. For me, that will be on the left. So I'm going to bring the back left corner of my blanket towards the front right corner until it meets with that long edge. With my hands in front of my blanket, I will bring my left knee towards my left wrist, and the ankle comes to that front corner on the opposite side of the blanket, behind my right wrist. From here, you might grip the mat with your toes of the back leg and inchworm that knee back in space, scooting it back on the mat, bringing your hips closer to the floor. This is a great opportunity to either bunch that blanket up underneath you or bring a pillow or block or some other form of heightened support underneath your bent hip. All right, from here, a reminder, you have an option with your bent knee. With this ankle, you can flex the toes towards the shin for support on that knee, bringing the ground to connect with the outside of your ankle and calf and shin. Alternatively, you can point the toes, kind of sending them in the same line as your shin back behind you and towards the right, and rolling a bit onto the front of that shin. These are both safer options for the knees and just kind of letting the foot go wherever it will. So let that be intentional. Make this yours. It might be helpful as you get settled to move any height out from underneath that hip. Once you've kind of built your nest, maybe scoot that back leg back in space any amount more. Really glue that back top of foot to the mat as you press your front shin into the mat and lift your hands. From here, you can now fold, bring your handprints to the mat in front of you, lower your heart. Maybe find your elbows to connect with the mat. Maybe find blocks underneath you. Support yourself as needed. Let your pigeon look different from mine. This looks very different for every different body that practices this shape, let alone on any different day. You can bring that block underneath your forehead, or it might be nice to stack your fists to make a little tower to rest upon. Breathe here 3 to 5 long, nourishing breaths.